Again, keep in mind as we go through this, these are guidelines, not rules. Of course, everybody has their own way of putting together their own campaign. But these are ideas that have worked not just for me but for others. And you should adapt and enhance based on your own campaign group, of course, what your players want, and of course what you want. And if you're there by yourself, try to put this together. Trust yourself, but you should always verify with the others in your group to see if it's working out for them. With that in mind, let's go through our definitions. So, talking about campaigns, this is in the context of tabletop RPGs, of course. We assume it's more than one session. Right? You're shooting for that because that's what the campaign is. It's more than just one adventure. Some adventures are multiple sessions, obviously. So for the campaign, it's a series of adventures with at least one of the following. Probably a continuing character or team of characters, a continuing setting, because sometimes in superhero RPGs, people like to swap out their characters. And all that remains is the organization sometimes. Or a continuous narrative. There's a real storyline because everybody died and now these are the new next generation of heroes. Just because everybody got tired of playing their old heroes. But it's still the same campaign. So those are my definitions for the campaign. And of course, when we talk about superheroes, we're talking about Superman, Batman, Avengers, Blood Syndicate from Milestone, and of course the Authority. It's easier to give examples because there's lots of fights over what do you mean by superhero? Is it because they're superpowers, right? X-Men, or is it like the super Olympic level athletes as defined
Batman
in,
doesn't have powers.
right? But he does have a superpower. It's called being really rich, right? But yeah, that is the question, right? Is this still a superpower? If you have super opponents and you're just normal, is that still a superhero comic? Some people say yes. If it's all street level, is it still superhero comics or is it just a 90s adventure revenge film? It's still considered. Yeah. Is it the tights? So basically we give examples and we move on because that's not our concern, defining what superheroes are. So let me go through one of the methodologies that I created, an acronym in homage to a Star Trek phrase, IDIC, which there stands for Infinite Diversity, Infinite Combinations, one of the philosophies of the show. But because there's infinity twice, right? Remember that it's an exaggeration, but each of these areas that I'll cover are actually very deep wells. Don't go too far in, because ultimately you have to finish this within a deadline so that your players and you will actually be able to play. But it's good to explore so that you have some idea. Right? If you get too many options, it becomes very difficult to find your way out and then get rid of the rest of the stuff that needs to be done for a running campaign. So, my acronym is actually broken up into these 4 areas. 1, inspiration. Identify your sources of inspiration for the campaign. So what is your basis for it? Then there's delineation. You try to set down broad campaign goals. You identify guidelines and don'ts for you to craft the adventures and the sessions, but also for the players to create their characters and suggest their storylines. You start listing ingredients, key elements, events, conflicts, certain things that you want to come up in the campaign very clearly, settings and organizations. And then lastly, you anchor it with creation. You define the player characters and other characters in the game. In superhero games in particular, it tends to be very heavily predicated on the characters because these are the ones that appear on the cover of the comics. So it's rare that it's just the organization. So you really have to give some thought to the heroes and the opposition. So inspiration is my fourth of the presentation. Key uses for this step are you get stuff straight from the source, it helps you create an elevator pitch, and of course you can mine for ideas. What do I mean by straight from the source? Sometimes there's a comic book that you really want to play. Modify it slightly, but in essence everything is there. This is of course ideal because it makes doing the rest of your campaign work very easy. You can choose to take on the core premise, if not the characters and storylines themselves, from a specific comic book. One example here is the Power Company. This was a short-lived comic book run wherein basically they were all professional superhuman services. They sold their services to the highest, not to the highest bidder, they sold their services in the way that a law firm was done. You could have pro bono work. You had ongoing, you're on retainer for certain big companies.
Or X deals.
You can have X deals with other people, and you of course have specific short-term work. So this one, I actually did this for one of my, as an inspiration to one of my campaigns, wherein they do have a contract with the government and several private companies, and they run into problems here and there regarding that. Slide please. But then there's also the concept of an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is when people say it's kind of like Buffy meets Game of Thrones. Right? They mash up things, and it serves as a shorthand, so you get, oh, I see what kind of game this is going to be like. So in this case, you could argue like, oh, well, I want to run a Generations comic meets 52, which of course only makes sense if you actually know the references involved, right? But it does work as a shorthand, and I think that for those of you here who are into comics, you can already see how this probably takes place a lot more often, right? Because you can say, like, I want to have an X-Men, but it's kind of mashed up with Muppet Babies, for those of you who actually saw Muppet Babies. And another elevator pitch is, you try to do cross-time and cross-company things, right? So you have Guardians of the Galaxy meets the Great Darkness Saga. They're both science fiction-y, different universes, but there's this big villain who's really, really powerful. It's not that big of a stretch. It's just that you want to play with the mix of the different elements in the two science fiction universes. Next, please. And then, of course, last but not least, the inspiration aspect allows you to mine for ideas. If you already have a core concept, you can pick and choose ideas from many different comics. I want to have this from here, I want to have this from here. My image here is, of course, taken from Planetary by Warren Ellis, written by Warren Ellis. And here in particular, it's the main storyline, right? It actually took each issue from a different aspect of popular culture, including comics, but it had different ages of comics that it would highlight. It talked about Godzilla in one, it talked about the revenge ghosts in Japan in another, in China I think actually, in another, and then they talk about pulp in yet another one, and then those themes repeat and shift around. So mining for ideas, you can pick and choose. You don't want everything perhaps that comes with let's say the Brood from X-Men. You don't want everything, you just want them for a little bit, and then you throw out the rest.
Just take bits.
Just take bits from it. Yes. So, again, the reason you would go for this for inspiration rather than something that's concrete is just that you want the flavor, you want the sense, or you want the way that it works to be transplanted or realized in your game. Moving on from that, we're talking about delineation, wherein you start to go from the vaguer aspects that you identified into something slightly more concrete, and you start making decisions. So this is a series of sliders, which means that you can bring it up and down certain ratings to sort of get a better feel for what your campaign will be like in general. They help define aspects of the campaign, structure, how your campaign draws from the vast continuum of the genre. And many of these, by the way, came from Aaron Alston's Champion source book, which is called Strike Force. It is out of print, but a lot of the material in there found its way into future generations of both the Champions source books and other superhero source books. So, next slide. This is the morality slider. The question here is, how are issues of good and evil, heroism, villainy dealt with in the campaign? You can start from 5, where morality is only black and white. I'm thinking Batman 66 here, right? The classic Batman, is you're bad, you're good, right? It's, the old cartoons, superhero cartoons. Villains are villains,
Super
heroes are
Friends.
heroes. Super Friends. Villains are villains because they're villains.
They're
Heroes
bad
are
guys.
heroes, right?
Yes.
As opposed to a more modern take wherein they make fun of it in, I think it was Justice League Adventures, wherein Lex Luthor, who is actually being, they shifted bodies with Flash, right? He didn't wash his hands. Gorilla Grodd looks at him. Aren't you going to wash your hands? No, because I'm evil. That's Flash's understanding of good and evil. That's it. I don't wash my hands. I'm evil. Right? So you can have a campaign like that because maybe you don't want to deal with morality is only in shades of gray. Right? That's not what you and your guys are getting together on a Friday night on. Maybe because you deal with this 5 days a week. Right? So dito na lang tayo. It's fun. So that's one aspect that you want to define when you're crafting your campaign. Next. Another thing is plausibility. How often would superheroic exploits be based on real-world consequences? Our rating here is from extremely fantastic to extremely realistic. Right? So superhero science, right, isn't really science. Right? We always talk about how, that won't really work in real life, theoretically, and this is one of the great things about playing superhero games is when you have some of the science people talking about it. You can get geeky for a while and then you go back to playing it. Just hey, because comics, okay? That's it. But we got to great discussions here about theoretically all you need to do is not break adamantium but bend it, right? And then it will never be bent back into the proper shape. You actually have to reforge it, right? So that would be very difficult for Wolverine to retract back.
And there's time travel.
Time travel is always a pain. There's the fact that when you bend large poles and wrap them around people, it actually generates heat, right? So when you bend like something around someone to keep them there, they're actually going to be burned a little bit because that metal is really, really hot now. Depending on the metal that's there. I learned a lot of science from playing this with some masters in science. So this is something that you want to keep in consideration because if that's your thing, then great. If but I don't want to do that much research, you can play within this game. And if it's really fantastic, you have to remember this is comic books of this type, or remember this is Saturday morning cartoon, so it's this type of science. Wherein, Superman can block somebody with a laser sword with his heat vision. It didn't really work like that in the comics book. Right? Next. Optimism. How often does everything get wrapped up with a happy ending for everyone involved? Again, right? Everything always works out. It's like the Super Friends, right? Super Friends.
Everything works out with Geek.
You stop, and then there's a joke at the end, and everyone laughs, right? That's everything always works out. As opposed to, I really don't want to live in Westeros. It really sucks. Just visit very, very briefly, then go back home.
Everyone dies.
Everyone dies, which you should not be surprised about because the very first non-chapter, right, the introductory chapter, which did not have a number, all those characters, spoilers, all those characters that were introduced die within the next two chapters, right? Within the next two chapters, they're all dead. So you should have known, but we're so used to everything working out usually in episode shows, right? But in between, you can have balance. It depends because this is okay. Almost nothing works out. I think non-superheroes, this could be like Battlestar Galactica. Occasionally they have wins, but there's a real grind trying to get ahead. This could be because it's a very long campaign and you're trying to get them through. They feel that they're making some progress, but they really have to feel they're always in jeopardy. But if it's something else I'll tackle, which is episodic nature, it tends to be more here. Everything always works out. It helps there because it's reset. Everything goes back to normal. And then the next episode or the next gaming session you run, doesn't matter, right? You start again from the same page. So next slide. Humor. How large is factor is humor, banter, and tongue-in-cheek camp in the campaign?
Are you talking about, excuse me, Alex, stable humor or the campaign in general?
Campaign in general, because sometimes you can have characters like Plastic Man. You can have Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew. Right? For a short campaign, it's still a campaign. Right? So it's entirely for laughs. You can encourage people to create as wild characters as you want, right? But you have to set this down because if you have somebody who's dead set on playing, an emo Punisher, because Punisher is not emo, right? But an emo Punisher, and everybody else is like, Daffy Duck, and may super tight, Super Grover.
You're playing a Sandman
thing. It's that kind of thing, right? So you have to, let's be clear, that we can have jokes outside, but inside we're serious, right? There's no. But if you're totally wacky campaign because you basically bounce around the universe and you.
TMNT is just kind of like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Although their very first comic was actually serious. The humor came from the fact that these were very dark, gritty, and brooding turtles. Right? Otherwise, it was played straight the first issue. And then of course, modern day, there's that dramedy thing where you're not really sure. It sometimes goes up and down.
Breaking Bad.
Okay. That's one way of doing it. But yeah, but you have to establish more or less where you're going to be. Some games will be more here than others, but they're within the rights to complain if you said it was going to be lighthearted, and then most of the games are like deadly serious. So you give them an idea. Around here is where you will play. Next slide. Continuity. How major is continuity between adventures and sessions? Does the setting reset at the end of each adventure? No continuity, totally episodic. This is different from most shows now, right? Wherein there seems to be a story arc every season. Sometimes every week. It's like, last week, oh nga no, ang dami nangyari last week. I don't know what's going on. Whereas, not too long ago, you could tune in into anything and you're like, oh, I get the basic idea of what's going on here, and they fight crime, right? It's like
the A-Team before.
Yeah, like it didn't really matter that much what happened before. You get the basic idea from the opening sequence, right? Like for the Transformers, right? Autobots wage their battles to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons. Done. And then you can watch that episode with open sight because these are the Autobots who are fighting the Decepticons. Similarly, you could have no continuity, totally episodic. Doesn't matter every session. But then you get into gradation. There's some continuity, so you remember things from prior episodes. They're called back, but it's mostly episodic. I have an example here, which is actually Teen Titans Go, wherein pretty much it resets every single episode, except that once in a while they'll refer to a joke that appeared in a prior episode. We're like, hey, that's the mutated Robin from 3 episodes back. What's it doing there? It's just an ongoing joke, but it is some level of continuity. Of course, you can do however you want, but it's really actually, this is the other way that you can go. It's totally continuity. Every session is part of the arc. It's really section to section, unless second to second, day to day, unless you agree all to skip certain things. So, something to keep in mind when you're crafting things. Next. Setting. How different is the? Oh, sorry. Going back to the prior one. I mentioned earlier that this has ties also to prior components. So if you have totally episodic games, right, and there's no continuity, it sometimes has an effect on like the seriousness, because if you're serious, you tend to get the feeling that, but this happened several things back. Why does it reset? So there are some things that are interlinked. I just want to show them they are.
Okay.
You'll deal with it when you put together. So how different is the setting of the campaign from the real world, or at least the one that the play group is familiar with? The reason that I bring this up is because the more you go down, the more work for you and for your players. Like the more alien it is, the more you have to read up, the more you have to. Even if you create it on the fly, because it's that they had, there's a specific premise on how powers work. So here, if it's totally unfamiliar, you run into that same problem. Well, anything really goes. So we have to actually learn some of the rules so that we can build characters and adventure in this world. As opposed to the here and now, there's no superheroes until you guys. That's something everybody can understand. You're the first superheroes in the world. So that's something people can understand. So this was like a TV show, Heroes. Right? So that's basically very easy to set up. The only thing new is the fact that there are superpowers. And then in between there, you can go, well, this is like DC Comics back in this time, or this is modern Marvel Comics, or this is the reality of Saturday morning adventures in Avengers, right? Cartoons or Justice League. And this has an impact on you and your players, as I mentioned before. So try to choose very carefully here in particular. Next. Okay, so summary of the sliders are, One, morality, right? How black and white is everything. Plausibility, how much effort you want to put into science, not just the hard sciences, but the soft sciences. Like, is it really that easy to rebuild buildings that have been destroyed, right? Isn't the economy destroyed forever after Man of Steel, right? Right? So these are the things that you want to deal with, because in X-Men, you know, they solve things like, oh, the Golden Gate Bridge was destroyed, and then like an issue later, wealthy billionaire donates money to rebuild it, and then two issues later, it's been rebuilt. Wow! It took them years to build that in the first place, but next. Optimism, again, this is because you're going to be playing this on a regular basis. If it's a bit dark, right, then you know, everybody has to buy into that, because it might not be the stress release you're looking for. On the other hand, if you're going for it because you're in for it for the storytelling and for the depth of character exploration, if it's played regularly as light-hearted, you have to level expectations. Humor. This is also important in terms of your agreement as to is this a Wahoo type of campaign, which you can see a little bit of definitely in Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Because you seldom see a dance sequence. Spoilers. You know, towards the climactic end of the campaign of the movie, right? And of course, continuity, which is the bane of many a comic book company. But in your campaign, you can all talk about it. Just keep everybody honest. But it could be a headache moving forward. So just keep all these things in mind in terms of standards. Next. Setting. Of course, choose this carefully as well, because it can save you work in some areas but make more work in others, depending on your choices here. And I'm going over this very lightly, obviously. Okay, next, ingredients. So this is very closely tied to how we talked about you know, pick and choose early on. Because you get to identify what things specifically you want in your campaign. Make lists or diagrams of specific things you'd like to include. You basically think more detailed about key elements of your campaign in the universe and adventures. Then you can decide how big or small role they play. You just want to get them out of your heads, out of your head and onto paper to get an idea of, okay, these are how it will work with the prior materials you outlined. Thanks. So, for example, you think about sources of power, right? And you say, yeah, I think I only will allow super science, mutants, aliens, peak humans, and alt-humans, and magic. Wait, that's pretty much everything. So you might say, no, maybe I'll take out some. I'll keep the mutants and the aliens. No mutant aliens. Okay? And some altered humans, and that's it. No magic, no super science. You could do stuff like that. So this is where I say pick and choose. And you really delineate these things. Another example would be sources of adventure. It's really hard to read, I realize now. But you can say like, well, you know, sometimes it comes from the background of the players or the team. Sometimes it comes from the villains. Sometimes, you know, your villains can come from individuals and from the team as well. There are missions that come from you personally or from an organization or are imposed on you. And then there are events, like sometimes it's the villains, sometimes it's natural disasters, right? So things like that. Moving on. So you can also say, I don't want these things. I don't want hybrid sources of power, no mutant alien gods. Right? No gods, no cute animal mascots, please.
Or sidekicks.
Yeah. Of course, there are trigger things like rape, right? That you say, no, we don't deal with that. Yeah, we don't deal with artificial intelligences because there are issues that they have with those things. And we don't want to deal with politics anymore. This is all about adventure and so on. So these are the types of things that you want to introduce negatively in your campaign. You negate that this will not be a part of the campaign. If anybody asks, you go into commercial and then you come back and you move on. Because it's really not what you want to deal with in your game. Next. And so another example would be, well, I want to have elements from DC, Batman Beyond. I want to have League of Assassins, an element there. And then Challengers Mountain because I thought it was a really cool base. Right? Next. From Marvel though, I want to have S.H.I.E.L.D., I want to have S.W.O.R.D., and I want to have Agents of Atlas. So there's an ongoing theme of close to baseline, right, with high tech and agents.
With organizations.
Organizations that are up against it. And then, just to throw in some international flavor, because this tends to be very Western, we look at Giant Robo, which has its own organization of superpowered specialists. we'll have Ultraman for the space because it's always
Large
like
monsters.
just a change of pace. I don't want to have like Green Lanterns out there. Let's have Ultraman policing the galaxy and keeping it safe, and occasionally coming here. And then for the lower end, we have Mask Rider, Kamen Rider for the rest of the world. So this is the kind of thing where you can choose, and then you decide, yeah, I want it to be globe-trotting because League of Assassins, and I have set up some things in Japan, and of course there's an Asian element here in Agents of Atlas. So these are the things that you pull together, having done all the prior work. Also, you start to get a very concrete feel for, okay, these are the probable settings I have to put together. I probably have to create standard agents for these. I'll have to create an organizational chart for this, and so on and so forth. And what you can end up with actually is, okay, I want big tough girls fighting it out. Right? This comes from Super Team Family, a very cool blog. Someone who photoshops various art, or your entire super team could be, I want people with pet birds as my team. So you have Dr. Midnight, for example. Right? You have Falcon, and of course you have Birdman and Venger. So these are the types of things that you can put together. You just pick and choose and you put them together. And then finally you get your characters. So assuming all prior elements were agreed upon or communicated to players, there are some character guidelines to consider, which are your cast of characters, not just the PCs but the NPCs, obviously, and whether or not they are foils to your players, whether they're neutral or they're allies, and so on and so forth. So, are they always the same? Or is it a rotating cast? In my experience in superhero games, there are some players who keep wanting to build new superheroes. So you have to talk to them and keep that in mind. Like, would you always play your character? Or would you alternate between two? Or do you want it to continuously rotate? There was a guy who built 26 characters.
Wow.
Different letters of the alphabet. And different powers. Very simple. Like, what? He just jumps. That's all he does. The fabulous frogman. Is it going to be structured that there's one guy who will always be there, the other guys can't always make it, so central character and then a supporting cast, right? These are things that happen also. Or is it an ensemble cast where no, everybody should be here because there's always it's a group. It works together. It doesn't really work as well if not everybody.
It can't be the Fantastic Three.
No. Although they do that from time to time. But yeah, it's true. Because part of the enjoyment is that there's conflict between the player characters every time you put a combination of two of them in the game, right? As opposed to if everybody pretty much gets along with the leader, it's a different type of thing. Next. Another thing to consider is power levels. So are they pretty much the same, right? So they all have the same power level, or are they wildly varying? So sometimes you can have, the question side by side with Silver Surfer, yes, right? But some people don't want to play that. They want to be all the same level. We all want to be variants of Wolverine. Okay? I get the claws, I'll get the saw.
The regeneration.
Pero powered saw naman yung sa akin, yung nag-rotate, hindi yung because that's really, it's going to be painful and you'll get knocked out by your body. Next. Powers and specializations. Under this area, are we enforcing uniqueness? Only one person has this type of power, one person has this type of power. Is duplication okay and encouraged? Right? This is the Star Wars in Marvel Universe campaign. So everybody's expected to be a Jedi of some kind, right? Which did happen back in the 80s and 90s. Until the GM just said, I had enough, and started killing them all off. Right? But, the other thing to consider is number of PCs. There are people who play just with one. And then, sometimes it's all about two people. So you just do a team, it's a regular team-up thing. You have your classic Cloak and Dagger. You have Heroes for Hire, right? Which is Iron Fist and Power Man. Cage Power Man.
Batman and Robin.
Batman and Robin. When Robin was more of a adult, as opposed to just a sidekick. And then of course you could have wildly different powers. This is a Batman and Ghost imagined team-up. With more than that, maybe 3 or more, you can have the regular superhero team, but they don't have to have different powers. They can be all the same, just different ways of using the same powers. So you have your Green Lantern core. Or you can have your huge cast. In fact, everybody, you could only have 5 players, but like have 25 members on the team, as in the Legion of Superheroes. Actually, they have more than 25. It's a rotating cast. It allows some people to have team-ups with non-player character heroes. Right? And some people can get to play more than one character because they don't really want to play with one for very long. So these are the types of things that you want to keep in mind. Number of PCs isn't necessarily the number of players, but it's very close to that. Something to keep in mind when you're crafting your campaign as well. Because if it's something like this, right, it's very focused on one. If it's something like this, but there's one main character, right, then you run into the balancing act of, well, everybody should still have their moment to shine, even though there's a central helper. Anyway, moving forward. This was just a little bit of animation, just to highlight each of these things. Okay. Next is character capability spread. This goes a little bit more slightly into the mechanics concerns, which is, for superheroes, do they have the capability to attack, to defend themselves, to move around? Do they have mental defenses or capabilities? Do they have high-tech stuff? Do they have magic? Do they have skills? Okay, why did I bring all of these up? Click again, please. Because you want to talk about when people build them, do you allow obscenely capable characters? I can do that too. Right? Like I am the master martial artist. Me too! It's the same voice saying, me too, I can do that. Man, this is my thing. Right? But that's my character concept, man. I can do everything, guys. My superhero name. So, but it's not that easy to do in certain games. In fact, most modern superhero games already make it difficult to this point, based or otherwise. It's very difficult to do that now. Back in the day, it was quite possible to do that obscenely capable character, who is, of course, psychologically and physically crippled, right? To afford everything. Next. Or is it just a well-rounded character, good in everything? Is that the kind of thing you're trying to push? Slightly better in one area, but otherwise you can team up groups and they can support each other. Or do you want to have some weaknesses? No, like I got no mental defenses at all, right? Sorry. And this is classic. If you're a solo character, this makes sense, right? Single superhero makes sense. If you have some weaknesses, like for example, you don't have any movement, and all of you don't have any movement, or one of you has movement but can't carry the other three. It becomes difficult when you go, like, it's in New York! Bahala na sila. Nandito tayo sa Pinas. Tignan mo nga yung pal, di ba? I mean, but that has happened, you know, yung people like, oh, let's take the bus! Nandun sila, they're riding on the way to fight crime. So there are some gaps that you have to consider when you're putting together your team and your campaign, right? Offense and defense, obviously. Mental, you could excise this entirely from your campaign. There's no mental stuff, don't worry about spending moves. But magic is another major breaking point. And if some person is all skills, right, then ideally nobody should be better than him. Things like that, where you balance out their capabilities. Of course, you could have some glaring gaps, slight variance on the weaknesses, as I mentioned before. And you could have the one-trick pony. It's not really that much fun, right, for that guy, because that's the only thing they can do. Like a guy who created, one of my friends who created the incredibly voracious Ant-Man, who could defeat someone larger than him, but then that's all he could do. He could only do it once. Talagang one-trick pony. And before he could do it again, he had to eat the opponent he defeated. So it's like, no, you don't want to win our campaign. Thank you. Build another one. Okay. And then, of course, you consider, when you're building a character, the rule set. I gave some, but there's obviously a lot more superhero games out there. There's the classic Marvel superheroes. This is the advanced set. The basic set is obviously much simpler. But there was a recently discontinued right away, Marvel Heroic Role-Playing Game, which is also fairly good. The classic DC Heroes, the last edition I think was third, and then the more modern one, which is actually also Mutants and Masterminds in terms of rule sets. This is very, it has a lot of rules, but it actually plays loosely. It's a pretty good rule set. And this is also a lot looser, I think, in terms of the game. It has a slightly more story feel. It doesn't give hard metrics as you can lift X amount. It doesn't define it in terms of your stats. You write it down, it's like, well, he can lift this much and he can lift this much, but it doesn't say that if you have a D12 for your strength, it means you can lift this much, as opposed to this, which it actually did, but it gave a range. It was a little bit more flexible if you could push it. This one was a little bit more defined, as is this, a lot more mechanics involved, but at the same time, not quite as specific as one of my favorites, Champions. Champions was very specific in terms of how much you could lift, how far you could throw things, how much strength did you need to deflect a planet thrown at you. And you could calculate all those things. Do I have enough strength to body slam the universe? Let's calculate the mass of the universe.
Because they're not publisher specific, probably. Well, they're not publisher specific.
Which one?
Champions.
Champion, no.
Yeah.
These ones are
Publisher
specific to the intellectual property they support. But Champions was really, their own IP. But this has a reputation for being very crunchy, even though it did not involve square roots or cubing values as some science fiction games did. It's still considered very crunchy. Icons is another rule set that is a lot looser, a lot more story-oriented, and it has, I think, 10 rankings in terms of power. It's very much inspired by Marvel.
Positive.
Yeah, but it also has some elements of fate in it. So you can invoke certain aspects. And as you can see, it's somewhat inspired by Saturday morning cartoons. But really, it's more inspired by a lighter style of play, because the guy who did this, Steve Kenson, was also one of the first was the main game designer for Witness of Master. So they're two different approaches. Okay. And so that's it, my presentation for the various things that you will probably need to do, not all, but a lot of things you will give some thought to in crafting your superhero game. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Question.
Well,
Questions?
Yeah. So, all those ingredients, do you agree to that with your players from your
Yes.
experience, even before a single character is made? Like you tell them, this is that.
I
Or-
think
or
that
how
it's
do you do
good
that?
I think it's good to actually bring these things up, and this is what I want. But because players will want to negotiate also with you, I think primarily because it's a superhero game. If you're going to play a hero in your mind, right? When you're playing a superhero, perhaps in other cases, I'm just a supporting character. When you build a superhero psychologically, it's that screen time that's important to you. So for them, it's good to negotiate and say let's all agree.
Okay, how do you deal with players who overshadow the others with their, I can do everything
Well,
kind
you
of
have
power?
you do it in a couple of ways. One is you can do it by really curtailing their power on the character sheet. Another way is by segregating them or limiting them in the various situations that you place them in. Such as, guess who's in a death trap this week? And so and then other people have to work together to save him. Or that person is in a death trap with an innocent, so he gets to do important stuff like I have to keep this child safe, but I can't overshadow everyone because this is the only thing I'm doing. There's always the classic bank robbery with hostages, wherein if all you have to do is blast everyone, it would be fine. But there's always have to protect the innocents, have to prevent the ceiling from collapsing. So you have to be creative, I guess. But in general, you tone them down and you try to get them to agree to a certain area. There are some people who you will allow though, because they're good players and role players, to have really powerful characters because they play their roles well. Like there is a guy who plays a Superman type character, but his first choice is, okay, I only attack at half power because I don't know if they will survive my punch, or I will save the innocents first every single time. So it really depends also on the player. Yes.
I've never played a superhero game before, so I'm coming from the traditional fantasy point of view. If I try a superhero game, what would be the things that I should be on the lookout for? Yung major differences that might destroy the feel of the game? Kasi I came from the traditional fantasy.
I'm not sure what kind of traditional game you're coming in, but if I make an assumption, it's like the
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons, adventuring, killing things, and
Killing-
making their stuff.
Killing people just to make sure that they're not monsters.
The first thing that you have to accept is that this is an urban adventure. So if in a fantasy realm, you don't go around killing people in the fantasy realm, right? Because the law there tends to be more capable, and they will hunt you down if you break the law. The other thing is that it is closer to our world than in a fantasy world. So there are people who will remember that, hey, you're that guy who burned down the bank. You know, even though you're a superhero. So there's that kind of thing where this is not like the Wild West. This is a modern day, and you have to adjust in thinking modern day play. That you can't just take somebody's stuff. There's cameras everywhere, and people will say, hey, so and so. You have to deal with PR, you have to deal with social issues. Pretty much a lot of the stuff that's in comics, you know, that you have bad press. Those are the things that you have to keep in mind when coming from that. At the same time, you have to also get rid of the concept of I have to keep all my stuff with me, like the huge equipment list. Right? It's usually not as important in a superhero.
Surprisingly, if I may add, because I've had experience running various, like everything there except for one game. Because since it's modern day and technology that we're all used to, the shift isn't that bad. Once you either DM it or you play it, but oh wow, since you already have read, you're a comic book fan, the Avengers, Spidey, like Thor, it's very easy to get into. So,
and you get different insights.
Don't be intimidated by it na it's like a paradigm shift. It's not. It's just, parang nag-iba ka lang nag-switch and then you're there.
The other thing that that I would recommend is that you actually play in a setting you're very familiar with, like the Philippines. And we got a lot of buy-in that way when we used to run that, because people are saying that, swinging isn't that useful a power in the Philippines. You can only do it in certain areas in Makati. Swing from a building.
So not a building. Not a building.
So it's more useful to jump on top of cars. Yung mga scenes na talon ka from
or teleport.
Or you ride on top of the MRT to get somewhere. Mga ganun, as opposed to... Flight is also really interesting because there was a power armored guy who wanted to be based in Forbes. Then, when he flies back to his home in Forbes at night, there's this huge jet. Nakikita mo yung energy coming from his power man suit. He's flying there. And then, syempre, all the really rich and powerful people are like, shit, I can't go home. Then he took public transport back na lang. Kasi, what are we gonna do? There's a guy, he's landing in the park! He's landing in the church! Everybody's watching it. Right? It's you think in a different way, but if you think someplace you're familiar with, you can get there faster.
So it's like the social constraints are, there's more social constraints in superhero games.
Yes.
But that's also what makes it fun.
Yes.
From experience, it's not the social that they should be. If you're to be GMing it, it's actually technology. Because of the internet and computers, the normal, diba, in D&D, the whodunit thing, you have to investigate, you have to speak with them, you have to look for clues. You need to know, they just hack into, I'm sure you have that, just hack into the network, hack into the database, and they have all this information. And the most abuse, from my experience, is really computer skill, because, I'm so good. It says here in the book, I can siphon off billions from the IMF, diba? And they can do that one if you're the DM. Oh, what the fuck? They have billions.
Oh.
Yeah. So
but
technology
I guess,
really is around.
But the other thing I will tack on there is that there is also the cultural aspect, I think, that you want to deal with, because there is also a sort of comic book logic that if you want to be romantic about it, people get away with that all the time. So yeah, he lands in Forbes and nobody notices. You accept the fact that Superman is never noticed flying out of the Daily Planet.
Yes.
Yeah, every time he goes to the closet, he goes, nobody notices that. So there is some sort of romantic, again, that romantic slider, right? Like, and you see somebody climbing on the roofs in the Philippines.
Okay.
Sino yan? Diba?
Window
People notice.
How come the Hulk's pants never get, shattered?
How do you buy that?
Galing ng pantalon ni Hulk, diba?
Magka-selfie yung mga tao.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
So, things things like that. Romantic, no, they never figure out the secret dating. Depends really.
Yeah, if I may add, kasi we just played Venture yesterday, a superhero game.
Okay.
We used the fate system to craft the world. So it wasn't just the GM who crafted the world, it was the entire team. And we also crafted the villains. And it came to a point na one of us wanted a non-thematic character into the story.
Okay.
So we had to talk to him na, hey, it won't work. This is the setting that we crafted. We have superpowers. We have superpowered villains and we're supposed to be underpowered kasi nga we're gonna rise to the top and stuff. So may ganong factor na in the fate, that's why I love the fate system vis-a-vis the superhero games kasi parang you have control eh. There came a point na the villain was so well loved that one of us controlled the villain. Ganon. And parang yung ganon. So, it's all about consensus. Tsaka parang yung setting na first, parang dapat equal kayo in powers. Kasi if isa sa inyo underpower, overpower, di ba? Kawawa naman yung iba. You're working as a team. Parang yun ang maganda.
Well, that is something you may have to also negotiate as play goes on. Kasi there are some people who can dominate. Just by their personality or their
presence
or their capabilities. They're really good at what they do because there's some guys who are super tactical. So you have to negotiate these things also. But the non-thematic aspect is also very problematic because again, if you have say Plastic Man, diba? Tapos everybody else is like
Emo
dark,
Batman,
emo, super team in a world that they never made. Ay, Plastic Man. Nakakasira siya. It helps occasionally, but probably not as a main. But, it depends also if it can be made. So, maybe next time I can tackle more about the balance in play. But,
question then, kasi you're gonna be crafting a campaign.
Yes.
Ideally, you find a group of players that want to play it the way you want it to be played.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah. Pero, so, what's the order in things ba? Kasi,
Sorry, what?
what's the order in things? Kasi, do you craft the adventure, then look for players, or look for players first, then craft an adventure on your consensus? Or you craft an adventure, and then you find a group of players, and then you adjust your adventure to meet halfway yung expectations ninyo?
I think it depends. If you haven't crafted the adventure yet, I think that it's best that you kind of find your group first and make a pitch for, this is the kind of game that I would like. Because it can potentially change also when they build their characters. Mental powers is one of the big things there, right? In Magic, kasi like where there's certain types of adventures like where in the world is this super villain? We have to find him in 24 hours or the world is doomed. Then if somebody built a character that was allowed into the game pero hindi napansin ng GM, I have a power that allows me to find any mind that as long as I've seen them, I can find them. Okay, let's go there. It's far away. How far? It's 7 hours flight. Sige. 7 hours. We still have the rest of the day, 24 hours. Tapos pagdating doon, ano na siya? Diba? Kasi he hadn't even started.
So you start with the concept first.
Yeah.
And then you pitch it to your potential players that this is the idea. So case in point,
And then that's when you make the specifics.
Don't invest time on our energy. So
Pero may broad idea.
may concept lang. So I had this idea na Philippine setting, Filipinos, and the Pag-asa was talagang a secret organization to look out for paranormal, after paranormal, and these people who had talents or mutations are recruited into that group, and wacky na siya na fun. That's it, superhero.
Yeah. So I think that's true. Sayang din yung oras mo if you come up with very specific tapos nobody wants to play. So it's good to get the buy-in first before you create the details of an adventure.
Do you get the information during character creation or do you talk to them before?
You should do it before and then you revalidate during character creation. Because sometimes they forget because natutuwa sila sa character creation.
Okay.
I can do this, I can build this. No, remember, street level. No power cosmic.
Okay.
Kung gusto mo silver surfer, baka pwedeng night trasher ka na. Skateboard ka. Hindi ka... It's kind of surfing.
Desktop.
But you're still like a really rich.
Under recycle bin.
Silver Surfer
Okay, I have to go.
Thanks.
Right?